Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Balls Out. I'm your host, Roman Arroyo, and we are here to talk about the return of God's favorite sport. There's a reason they play it on Sundays, people. Football is back, and we're going to talk about it. Tomorrow, the defending champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, take on the team that blew it in the AFC Championship game, the Baltimore Ravens. Should be a firefight, but I think Lamar and the boys are going to be fired up. They're going to take this one, the Ravens +3. Then we move to Friday in Brazil. The Green Bay Packers versus the Philadelphia Eagles. A matchup nobody would care about if it was here in the States. I say we ship them both to Brazil permanently. Who wins? Who cares? Moving on. Sunday night, Jared Goff against his old team. Matthew Stafford against his old team. We saw it in the playoffs, and I don't think it's going to be any different. The Detroit Lions, -3.5 is the pick. Sorry, Jacob. Finally, Monday night. The one we've all been waiting for. As the biggest, most successful chokers in the NFL, the San Francisco 49ers, take on second team in New York, the New York Jets. Can old man Rodgers survive one drive? We're going to find out. But folks, we're going to stick with this game to bring you our Balls Out Player of the Week. And that man is Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk has been crying like a baby all offseason about his contract. Hasn't been on the practice field, hasn't been getting reps. Expect a big game at a number 19. And finally, I'm going to bring you our stone cold lock of the century of the week. I don't even got to think about this one. It's the boys in blue, the New York Football Giants, to crush Sam Darnold and the Vikings. Lock it in, and we'll see you next week on Balls Out. Welcome to Balls Out. Week 2 of the NFL season is upon us, and that means the return of the worst thing to happen to professional sports since PED testing. That's right, Amazon Prime games are back. The Buffalo Bills meet the Miami Dolphins in an AFC East matchup. Both teams won week 1, but it wasn't easy. As for the pick, I don't know. The Bills gave up too many points to Pee Wee Kyler Murray. I'm going with the Miami Dolphins, -1.5. Now, as we head into Sunday night, I want to take a stop before prime time to talk about the Lions and the Buccaneers to bring you our Balls Out Player of the Week, and that's Baker Mayfield. Old man Matthew Stafford hung 300 yards on this Lions defense without one of his best receivers. I have no reason to believe that Big Game Baker can't do the same. Take the over on Baker Mayfield. Next up, Eagles, frauds. Cowboys, frauds. Dolphins, frauds. Vikings, surprisingly not frauds. It has only been 2 weeks, and this season is already off the rails. Welcome to Balls Out. We begin week 3 tomorrow night on Amazon Prime. The Patriots versus the Jets, AFC East matchup. Patriots, a little better than we thought they'd be. Jets, maybe a little worse. But this one seems kind of obvious. The Jets are the better team here. But as a betting man, I'm not touching this one. Too much history between these teams. Something crazy is going to happen. We're skipping this one. Moving forward to Sunday, a lot of interesting games in the early window. Texans, Vikings, both undefeated. Chargers, Steelers, both undefeated. Saints, Eagles, both should be undefeated, except that the Eagles blew it against the Falcons on Monday night. Love to see that. But folks, we're going to stick with this game to bring you our Balls Out Player of the Week, and that's Derek Carr. Look at me. This fuckery will not go on any longer. Derek Carr is not that good. Take the under. Don't believe his lies. Next, we head into primetime, where the defending champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, take on the Atlanta Falcons, who just pulled a massive upset this Monday against the Eagles. Can they do it again? Not if the refs have anything to say about it. I think Chiefs are going to win this game. However, we are going to take the Falcons at +4.5. I think they're going to cover. The Chiefs have been playing some very close games thus far. And finally, we see the return of one of the NFL's weirdest traditions, the Monday night overlapping doubleheader. I don't know why they do this, but personally I don't mind it. The first game, 7 o'clock, we see the Buffalo Bills take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm not going to linger on this one. Bills, -5.5. Then in the 8 o'clock game, we have the Washington Commanders versus the Cincinnati Bengals, the team that got lucky last week versus the team that seems to have completely run out of luck. I'm going to leave this one to my man Big Game Buster, and we will see you next week on Balls Out. Tomorrow night, we've got a rivalry game, the Giants versus the Cowboys. Now, as a member of the sports media, it is my responsibility to give you unbiased analysis, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Welcome to Balls Out. Now, folks, I've done the research, and what that research tells me is that Dak Prescott's going to throw no less than 3 interceptions. Malik Neighbors is going to have, 4, maybe 500 yards. And the D-line's going to hit Zeke Elliott so hard they drop him down a few more jersey numbers. Therefore, my unbiased pick is the Giants at plus 4.5. Next, we move on to Sunday, and before we hit prime time, I want to circle one of the games in the early window. Minnesota Vikings, Green Bay Packers. The Vikings have beaten the 49ers, the Texans, and most impressively, the Giants. And they are underdogs to a Green Bay Packers squad that beat Will Levis. I don't know what the fuck's going on with this one. This is what we call in the business easy money. Vikings plus 2.5. Sam Darnold keeps it rolling. Next, we move on to primetime, and it's a good one. The Buffalo Bills, who look like an absolute wagon, take on a Baltimore team that's very talented, but is off to a rough start. This is a huge opportunity for them to bounce back. Are they going to do it? I don't know. I'm going to cop out and give you our balls out player of the week, and that's James Cook. The Buffalo Bills are using the run game more than they ever have before, and it's working wonders. James Cook for an anytime touchdown is a lock. So lock it in and let James cook. And finally, we end the week with yet another Monday night overlapping doubleheader. The first game is an absolute clown show. The 0-3 Titans take on a Dolphins team that barely has a quarterback. Who wins? Not the fans. Moving on. In the actual Monday night game, the Seattle Seahawks take on the Detroit Lions. The Seahawks currently 3-0 against abysmal competition. But we're going to find out against Detroit if they're the real deal or if they're just wasting our time. I'm going to leave this one a big game buster, and we will see you next week on Balls Out. Week 5 of the NFL season is upon us. 2 undefeated teams remain, and it's exactly who you thought it would be. Welcome to Balls Out. We start the week off tomorrow night on Amazon Prime. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers take on the Atlanta Falcons. I gotta tell you, the NFC South is a lot of fun in none of these teams are making the Super Bowl kind of way. That being said, I still think Tampa Bay is the best team in the division. I think they're going to win. Give me Tampa Bay plus 3.5. Next, we head overseas for a Sunday morning matchup between the New York Jets and the Minnesota Vikings. Now, obviously, I could talk about Sam Darnold and his history with the Jets and how they tried to kill his career, but I'm not going to do that. I think it's low-hanging fruit. Everyone's talked about it. I'm not going to talk about how the Jets are a garbage franchise and how they had an embarrassing loss to Bo Nix next week. I'm not going to talk about any of that. I think this show is above that. That's not classy. I'm not going to make any mention of any of that stuff, and I'm just going to give you the pick. It's the Minnesota Vikings minus 2.5 over the sorry-ass Jets. As we move forward to the rest of the Sunday slate, a lot of shitty games going on this week. Nothing really notable to talk about. That goes for the primetime game as well. The Dallas Cowboys take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's right, folks. It's a good old-fashioned fraud-off, so buckle up. The Dallas Cowboys are only 2 weeks removed from getting their ass pounded by Derek Carr, of all people. And the Pittsburgh Steelers just lost to a 40-year-old Joe Flacco. I'm not making a pick for this game. Instead, I'm going to give you our balls-out player of the week, and that's CeeDee Lamb. As a Giants fan, it kills me to admit this, but this dude kind of rocks. And finally, on Monday night, Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints take on Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Refs. I'm going to leave this one to Big Game Buster, and we will see you next week on Balls Out. Tomorrow night, the underperforming 49ers take on the overperforming Seattle Seahawks, and we're going to talk about it. Welcome to Balls Out. Both of these teams took an L last week and desperately need to get back in the win column to stay relevant. Normally, Niners at minus 2.5 would be a lock, but they're playing like ass, so I can't take it. Instead, I'm going to give you our balls out player of the week, and that's Jordan Mason. Last week, the New York Giants and Tyrone Tracy ran through the Seahawks D-line like a turnstile. I gotta believe Jordan Mason is going to have the same luxury, so take the over on Jordan Mason. Moving on to Sunday, we have another overseas game, this time between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Chicago Bears. I don't know what London did to deserve that, but moving on. Very interesting game in the 1 o'clock window between the Baltimore Ravens and the Washington Commanders. Can Jaden Daniels continue his historic rookie season? But I want to talk about a different game. I want to talk about the Arizona Cardinals and the Green Bay Packers. You see, I don't get to talk about the Arizona Cardinals very often because they usually suck. But they're actually playing some pretty decent ball this year. And the Green Bay Packers defense is ass. So for that reason, I'm going to take the Cardinals at plus 5.5. I think they can at least cover. Moving on, we have a head scratcher of a primetime game this week. The New York Giants against the Cincinnati Bengals. It's jarring enough to see the Giants playing in primetime, but it's even crazier to see them go against a team with an even worse record. On paper, it's actually not a bad matchup. The Bengals have a good offense, not much else. Giants have a good defense, not much else. But come on, you know what we're doing here. This is a Giants show. I'm taking the Giants plus 3.5. If you don't like it, don't look at it. And finally, Monday night, it's an all New York matchup between the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. The Buffalo Bills have dropped 2 straight and Josh Allen got dropped on his head. Meanwhile, the New York Jets just scapegoated their head coach in week 6. Both of these teams are desperate for a win. But I'm going to save this pick for Sunday night, and we will see you next week on Balls Out. The Vikings and the Chiefs both return to action for an absolutely stacked Week 7. Welcome back to Balls Out. Before we get to the good games, let's get tomorrow night out of the way. Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos against his former team, the New Orleans Saints. It's a great storyline, but both of these teams are pretty mid. The Broncos just lost to the Chargers, so I'm guessing their Cinderella run is over. Spencer Rattler looked pretty good in his first start. Let's take the Saints at plus 1.5 and move on. Next up, 1 o'clock on Sunday, it's the unbeaten Minnesota Vikings against the Detroit Lions. Vikings coming off a bye. Meanwhile, the Lions just said bye-bye to any chance of the Cowboys making the playoffs. Gotta love that. On paper, this is easily the best game of the season so far. And that makes it hard to pick a winner. So I'm not going to. Instead, I'm going to give you our Balls Out player of the week, and that's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Last week, it was the Lions' run game that got the job done. But the Vikings' defense is a little more stout than the Cowboys, so I think they're going to be able to stop that run. And that creates more opportunities for Amon-Ra St. Brown to do his thing. Take the over on Amon-Ra St. Brown. Next up in the 4 o'clock window, it's a Super Bowl rematch. The Kansas City Chiefs against the San Francisco 49ers. Should be a good game, except that McCaffrey's legs haven't grown back and the rest of the team forgot how to play football. Obviously, there's a chance that seeing those red uniforms again lights a fire under the 49ers, but right now I just have no faith in them. I'm taking the Chiefs plus 1.5. Now I know what you're all thinking. With a slate of games this good, the primetime game must be excellent, right? Wrong. Jets again. Now, granted, the Jets have picked up Davante Adams, probably at gunpoint from their own QB. Meanwhile, their opponents, the Pittsburgh Steelers, have just benched their 4-2 quarterback to instead start a 35-year-old Russell Wilson. This game is a masterclass in mismanagement. I'm not picking a winner. Frankly, I hope they both lose. And finally, we end the week with a good one. Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Both teams are 4-2. Both teams are in the mix in their respective conferences. Should be a good game. I'm going to leave that one for Big Game Buster, and we'll see you next time on Balls Out. There's also a 9 o'clock game of drastically lower value if that tickles your peach. We'll see you next week. Man, it is good to be back doing the show. I can't wait to get into it. Let's see what we got on Thursday night. It's the Jets again. Welcome back to Balls Out. Folks, there is nothing I can say about the Jets that hasn't already been said a million times. What I do want to know is why are they favored over a 6-2 Houston Texans team? Usually I see a line like this, I say, all right, clearly Vegas knows something that I don't. But no, I'm sticking to my guns on this one. Give me the Texans plus 1.5. The Jets suck. Looking forward to Sunday, I tried to find a highlight in the 1 o'clock window. Best I could come up with was Baltimore Ravens versus Denver Broncos. It'll be interesting to see how the Ravens come back from a loss to the Browns. Speaking of the Browns, I want to give you our Balls Out player of the week, and that's Nick Chubb. Chubb is easily my favorite player not wearing a blue jersey. I am so happy to see him back on the field, and now that Deshaun Cosby's out of the way, I have no reason to feel bad about rooting for him. So we're going to go with a Nick Chubb anytime touchdown. Next up, we have a huge game in the 4 o'clock window. The Detroit Lions versus the Green Bay Packers. The NFC North is insane right now. The Lions look like an absolute buzzsaw. The Packers, on the other hand, I just don't see it. They have a 6-2 record. The stats look good, but for whatever reason, this team just isn't clicking with me. I don't see what everyone else sees here. I'm taking the Detroit Lions minus 3.5. I think they're going to put on a show in Lambeau. We're going to stick with the NFC North as we move on to prime time. The Minnesota Vikings versus the Indianapolis Colts. The Vikings, for the first half of the season, were the talk of the town, but it's starting to look like they were all talk. Meanwhile, the Colts just benched Anthony Quitterson in favor of Joe Flacco. Good move. I don't think it's going to be enough, though. I think the Vikings are the better team. I still think they're going to win. However, Minus 5.5 is a little much for me. If anything, I would take the money line. And finally, Monday night, receivers beware, you're in for a scare. The Kansas City Chiefs take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Both these teams' receiver rooms look like a graveyard smash. We're going to leave this one to Big Game Buster, and we will see you next time on Balls Out. Breaking news at the trade deadline. You're not going to believe this. We actually have a good game of football on Thursday night. Welcome to Balls Out. That's right, folks. It's the Baltimore Ravens against the Cincinnati Bengals in an AFC North matchup. The last time these teams met, it was a classic overtime battle. I think we're going to get another good one. I don't know who's going to win this one. For me, it's too close to call. So instead, I'm going to give you our Balls Out Player of the Week, and that's Derrick Henry. Before the season, people said Derrick Henry was washed. What they failed to mention is that he was also buffed, shined, and waxed. Derrick Henry for an anytime touchdown. Lock it in. Moving on to Sunday, we will be heading overseas as the New York Giants take on the Carolina Panthers in Germany. I don't know what Germany did to deserve this. Well, aside from, But it is a known fact that Daniel Jones plays his best ball as far away from New York as possible. This is the farthest he's ever going to get. This is going to be a career game for Daniel Jones. Take the Giants minus 4.5. Moving on to the 1 o'clock window, we have a good one as the Washington Commanders take on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Russell Wilson is playing like a young man again. Jaden Daniels is playing like a seasoned vet. This is going to be a fantastic game, but I think the difference is going to be J.J. Watt and the Steelers' defense. Give me Pittsburgh plus 2.5. Moving on to the 4 o'clock window, the Cowboys take on the Eagles in an NFC East matchup. To tell you the truth, I would usually take this time to say something mean about the Cowboys, but I think the entire world has already beaten me to it, so let's just move on to primetime. Sunday night, the most exciting team in football, the Detroit Lions, take on the Houston Texans, who just lost to the Jets. It's more exciting than I'm making it sound. The Texans are still a pretty good team, all things considered, but I'm not stupid enough to bet against this Lions team. Give me the Lions, minus 3.5, lock it in. And finally, there's a football game on Monday night. Honestly, that's all I care to say about that one. We'll see you next week on Balls Out. Week 11 is finally upon us, and we have a trifecta of huge games, so let's get into it. Welcome back to Balls Out. Going into the season, the Eagles were a massive favorite to win the NFC East, but the Commanders, led by rookie sensation Jaden Daniels, have been a force. They finally clash tomorrow night. It should be a good one. I'm not going to tell you who's going to win. Instead, I'm going to give you our Balls Out Player of the Week, and that's Saquon Barkley. Saquon is already having a fantastic season, but I know better than anyone that he does his best work running over Washington. Take the over on Saquon Barkley. Moving on to Sunday, we have a huge matchup in the AFC North as the Ravens take on the Steelers. On paper, the Ravens are Super Bowl contenders, but they haven't played like it. There's no consistency. Meanwhile, the Steelers are rolling thanks to a previously washed Russell Wilson. I believe in momentum. I'm taking the Steelers at plus 3.5. Moving on to the 4 o'clock window, it's another huge AFC matchup as the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Buffalo Bills. The Chiefs should have lost last week. We all saw it. But no, they've got an ace up their sleeve and a Bible in their pocket. They just can't lose. I think Buffalo is a great team, but I just can't pick them. Give me the Chiefs plus 1.5. Moving on to primetime, the Los Angeles Chargers take on the Cincinnati Bengals in yet another AFC matchup. The Bengals haven't won an important game all season. The Chargers haven't played an important game all season. Frankly, I can't believe one of these teams is going to the playoffs. I'm not making a pick on this one. I might not even watch it. Next. And finally, Monday night, it's the battle for Texas. The crumbling Cowboys take on the Houston Texans in a game that'll probably be a lot closer than it should be. I'm going to leave that one to Big Game Buster, and we will see you next week on Balls Out. The Chiefs have finally lost a game. The Cowboys can't win a game. And Tommy DeVito is back under center in New York. It is a great time to be alive because anything can happen. Welcome back to Balls Out. Well, maybe anything can happen was a bit of a stretch. The Cleveland Browns take on the Pittsburgh Steelers tomorrow night, and I don't think the Browns have a chance in hell. The line is only minus 3.5 for the Steelers, so I would hammer the hell out of that. But I'm also going to take this time to bring you our Balls Out Player of the Week, and that's Chris Boswell. Steelers kick a lot of field goals. Yeah. Moving on to Sunday, not a lot of great matchups in the 1 o'clock window. Obviously, my focus will be on the grand return of Tommy DeVito. But let me take this time to talk about the best team in football, the Detroit Lions. They are favored by minus 7.5 over the Indianapolis Colts, and after what I saw last week, that is not nearly enough. Take the Lions, expect them to keep on chugging. Moving on to the 4 o'clock window, we have a very important game between the Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. Yeah, you heard that right. The Cardinals and Seahawks matter. The NFC West is somehow wide open, and now these teams are both important. Obviously, I can't make a pick for this game because, like the rest of you, I have not been paying any attention to these teams. I didn't think it mattered. Well, now there's egg on my face. So, we'll sit back and enjoy this one. Moving on. Heading into primetime, we're going to stick with the NFC West as we talk about the Los Angeles Rams against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this might be the bitter Giants fan in me, but I just can't get behind this Eagles team. I just feel like there's something missing there. The Los Angeles Rams have a lot to play for. Even if they don't win, I think they can at least cover. So give me the Rams plus 3.5. And finally, Monday night, the Baltimore Ravens take on the Los Angeles Chargers. The Baltimore Ravens have been one of the biggest disappointments of the year so far. They have all the talent to be a Super Bowl contender, and they just have no consistency. The Chargers have been surprisingly good, so it's going to be tough for the Ravens to rebound. I'm going to leave this one to Big Game Buster, and we will see you next time on Balls Out. Week 14 is upon us, and that means the playoff race is in full swing. Who's in? Who's out? We're going to talk about it on Balls Out. Speaking of teams that are in, we have a great game tomorrow night as the Detroit Lions take on the Green Bay Packers. Both teams picked up a win on Thanksgiving, but Green Bay was more impressive. The Detroit Lions didn't have a great performance against Chicago. If there was ever a time to catch the Lions sleeping, it's right now. And for that reason, I'm going to give you our Balls Out Player of the Week, and that's Xavier McKinney. Xavier McKinney currently leads the league in interceptions, and Jared Goff is not exactly Mr. Lights Out, so I say we roll the dice on a McKinney pick. Moving on to Sunday, the 1 o'clock window is mainly reserved for the scrub teams who have no chance of making it. The only game that's even kind of meaningful is Minnesota Vikings, Atlanta Falcons. Kind of crazy how everyone jumped off the Vikings so fast. I mean, they're 10-2. You know, I think they have a real chance of making it, especially with Vanilla Vic on the bench. But whatever, moving on. Now, if you recall, a couple weeks back, I made mention to a 4 o'clock game between the Seahawks and the Cardinals. You know, important divisional game, very meaningful to the standings. Well, we're doing it again this week. Only this time, I'm actually going to make a pick. Give me the Arizona Cardinals, minus 3.5. I'm sorry, Seahawks, but a win over the Jets doesn't move me. Moving on. Moving on to primetime, it's everyone's favorite, the Kansas City Chiefs, taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, I've been saying all year that this Chiefs team is a completely different team in the playoffs. They're going to get it together down the stretch. They're going to make a push. But they look like shit. They still look like shit. I honestly can't think of one time they've impressed me this year. I'm starting to think they don't have a chance. Which is crazy when we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs. For that reason, give me the Los Angeles Chargers, plus 4. I don't know if they're going to win, but I think they can at least cover against this Chiefs team. And finally, Monday night, the Dallas Cowboys take on the Cincinnati Bengals in the Delusional Fan Base Championship. We're going to leave that one to Big Game Buster, and we'll see you next time on Balls Out. You have to forgive me, folks. I'm going to be keeping this episode brief. I'm a little sick right now. Sick of being a Giants fan, that is. Welcome back to Balls Out. We start off tomorrow night in the surprisingly competitive NFC West as the San Francisco 49ers take on the LA Rams. Rams just upset the Bills. 49ers just beat the Bears. And they also killed another running back. I don't know why they're favored. Give me the LA Rams, plus 3.5. Moving on to Sunday, we're going to breeze right through the 1 o'clock window and instead start in the 4 o'clock window. A lot of big matchups, including the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Both these teams are good, but there's questions as to whether they can make a deep run or not. Even so, Pittsburgh Steelers are 5.5-point underdogs. I think that's a lot. I think they can easily cover that. Give me the Steelers at plus 5.5. But enough about those bums. Let's get to the real game of the week, the Buffalo Bills versus the Detroit Lions. A lot of people say this is a Super Bowl preview game. I can't argue that. These two teams are incredible. And for that reason, I can't make a pick. It's too close to call. I'm going to give you our Balls Out Player of the Week instead, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs. Honestly, you could take your pick between the Detroit duo. They're both going to run wild, just like Kyren Williams did last week. Expect a big game out of Sonic and Knuckles. Moving on to primetime, the Green Bay Packers take on the Seattle Seahawks. Kind of a step down from the last couple games, if you ask me. But both teams are fighting for the top spot in their respective divisions. But who we kidding here? I saw the Seahawks lose to the Giants. Give me the Packers, -3.5. And finally, we have some pretty meaningless games on Monday. I'm going to leave one of those up to Big Game Buster, and we'll see you next time on Balls Out. Folks, we have a couple of massive AFC matchups lined up for tomorrow afternoon. Welcome to the Saturday special of Balls Out. First up, it's America's favorite team, the Kansas City Chiefs, taking on a fellow playoff team in the Houston Texans. Now, the reason I waited to make this video is because I wanted to know the condition of Patrick Mahomes. It's bad to bet against Patrick Mahomes, but it's even worse to bet on Carson Wentz. Thankfully, Patrick Mahomes is good to go, so I feel comfortable taking the Chiefs at +2.5. Next up on the Saturday slate, we have a massive AFC North matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. AFC North still up for grabs, and a win here would be massive. The Ravens are favored, which it makes sense. The Steelers just got spanked by the Eagles. But I can't pick this game. This is, in my mind, is too close to call. Instead, I'm going to give you our Balls Out Player of the Week, and that's Chris Boswell. Last time these two teams squared off, Boswell kicked 6 field goals. If he does even half of that this time, it's money well spent. Chris Boswell on the over. Moving on to Sunday, not a whole lot of compelling games here, so we are going to do a little Sunday speed round. Ready? Go. Eagles versus Commanders. Commanders have played an easy schedule this year. They have since been exposed. I'm afraid the Eagles might go all the way. Next. Lions versus Bears. Lions just took an L. They're going to be pissed. They're going to beat the shit out of the Bears. -6.5 is not nearly enough. Next. Giants versus Falcons. I wanted Michael Penix Jr. on the Giants. Now I get to watch him shove it down our throat for 4 quarters. Next. Vikings versus Seahawks. There is no way the Seahawks won 8 games. This has to be a typo. Next. Bucks versus Cowboys. How the fuck do the Cowboys keep getting primetime games? Baker Mayfield's gonna spank them silly. Time. Whew. And finally, New Orleans Saints take on the Green Bay Packers. 13.5 point spread. That tells you everything you need to know. I'll leave that one to Big Game Buster. And we'll see you next time on Balls Out. New year, same balls. It's the last week of the regular season and we're going to break it down. Welcome to Balls Out. Tomorrow we have an all AFC North slate that's going to decide a lot of things seeding-wise. The first game, the Cleveland Browns versus the Baltimore Ravens. The Browns have nothing to play for. The Ravens can still win the number 3 seed. So I got to imagine the Ravens are going to kick the shit out of them. I was going to give you the pick of the Ravens, but -18.5 is the spread. Now, I'm confident in the Ravens. I don't know if I'm 18.5 points confident, but you know what? It's the last week of the season. I'm going to go for it. Give me the Ravens, -18.5. The next game is a much better one. The Cincinnati Bengals against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers are still fighting for seeding, so there's a reason for them to try. The Bengals have to win. This is a must-win if they even have a chance of making it to the playoffs. So this is going to be a good game. Very close game. I don't know who to pick, so instead I'm going to give you our last Balls Out Player of the Week, and that's Joe Burrow. The Bengals have been an absolute mess this year, but the one constant is good play from Joe Burrow. So we're taking the over on Joe Burrow. Moving on to Sunday, the 1 o'clock window is a lot of meaningless games and a couple of mismatches, so instead we're going to jump straight ahead to the 4 o'clock window and talk about the Kansas City Chiefs against the Denver Broncos. This is a must-win for the Denver Broncos. If they lose, they are out of here. Thankfully, the Chiefs have nothing to play for, so they're sending in the subs. Good for the Broncos, right? Well, the Chiefs' backups might be better than the Broncos' front-ups, if you ask me. I don't know if the Chiefs are going to win, but with a +10.5 point spread, I'm going to lay it on the Chiefs. Give me the Chiefs. Moving on, Sunday night, the big one, the big kahuna. The Detroit Lions, 14-2. The Vikings, 14-2. Both teams fighting for the division title and the number 1 seed. This is what tickles my fancy. This is what I love about football. This game for me is too close to call. I wouldn't even dream of calling it. So instead, for one last time, we're going to leave this one to Big Game Buster. And we will see you next time in the playoffs on Balls Out. Playoffs? No sir, we play on. Welcome back to Balls Out. So I took a look at the wild card slate and I noticed that the NFC games are a lot better than the AFC games. I mean, the Bills are leagues better than the Broncos. The Steelers have all but given up. And the Texans and Chargers are just playing for the right to lose to the Chiefs. So instead, I'm going to give you an all NFC episode and we're going to leave the AFC pick to Big Game Buster. Let's go. We start off Sunday, 4:30, as the Philadelphia Eagles take on the Green Bay Packers. Now, both these teams do have questions at quarterback. Jordan Love got a little banged up last week. Jalen Hurts hasn't played in a couple weeks. Now, I do believe that both quarterbacks will play. This is a playoff game, not a bowl game. Even so, I think there's upset potential here. That might just be wishful thinking from a Giants fan, but with the line being at 4.5, I'm taking the Green Bay Packers. 4.5, Green Bay Packers. Moving on to primetime, we've got a real good one. Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. I hate that one of these teams has to lose, but I'm glad one of them gets to win. I mean, the Baker Mayfield story is fantastic. I love seeing him succeed. And Washington needed a season like this. They have sucked for so long. I can't make a pick on this one. Instead, I'm going to give you our balls out player of the week, and that's Mike Evans. 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons. That is an incredible stat from Mike Evans. I got to believe he's going to be seeing the ball a lot on Sunday, so take the over on Mike Evans. And finally, Monday night. Aside from the Detroit Lions, the Vikings have only lost to one team, the LA Rams, and that's who they're playing in the wild card. How can you not be romantic about football? After a slow start to the season, the LA Rams have really rebounded. They look like a great football team. Meanwhile, the Minnesota Vikings, despite being 14-3, a lot of people are jumping off the boat. A lot of people think Minnesota's going to lose this game. But not here on Balls Out. On Balls Out, we don't give up. We're taking the Vikings -1.5. Good luck to everyone in the playoffs, and stay tuned for Friday's episode of Big Game Busters Playoff Picks. Until then, we'll see you next time on Balls Out. TikTok may be dead, but the playoffs are still very much alive. Welcome back to Balls Out. No filler, we're going to jump right into it. This Saturday, America's favorite team, the Kansas City Chiefs, take on the Houston Texans. Before the playoffs, I would have said the Chiefs were a lock. But the Texans just played their best game of the season, and the Chiefs starters haven't played in 2 weeks. There's upset potential here. An 8.5 point spread definitely makes this interesting. But I'm not stupid. I'm not going to bet against the playoff Chiefs. So I'm going to take a very rare money line bet on the Kansas City Chiefs. Not going to waste too much time on this next one. Good for the Washington Commanders getting a win in the playoffs. But the Detroit Lions are too tall a task. We're taking the Lions at -9.5. Moving on to Sunday, we have a very interesting game between the Philadelphia Eagles and the LA Rams. I think the Eagles are a better team, but I think the Rams last week played better. I mean, Green Bay didn't even look like they belonged. The Eagles probably should have pummeled them by 30 points. Now, I'm not saying the Eagles are going to lose. But I think after what the Rams did last week, a +6 point spread is insulting. So we're taking the LA Rams at +6. And finally, Sunday night, the big one. The Buffalo Bills versus the Baltimore Ravens. MVP candidates Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson finally square off for the second time this season. The first game was a dominant win for the Baltimore Ravens. I don't think it's going to be that way this week. I think we're going to get a very close game, so close that I can't make a pick. Instead, I'm going to give you our Balls Out Player of the Week, and that's Derrick Henry. With all the talk around these two great quarterbacks, a lot of people seem to have forgotten that both of these teams have incredible running backs. I'm a huge fan of James Cook, but I'm going to side with Derrick Henry, so take the over on the King. Now, if this is truly the end of TikTok here in the US of A, I want to encourage everyone watching to go subscribe to my YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time on Balls Out. 4 teams, 2 massive rivalries, the playoffs are in full swing. Welcome back to Balls Out. We start 3 o'clock on Sunday as the Philadelphia Eagles take on the Washington Commanders, proving what I have always said, that the NFC East is the best division in football, bar none. The Eagles had a solid performance against the Rams, but the real story is the Washington Commanders beating the sentimental favorite Detroit Lions in a massive upset. This Washington Commanders team could be the real deal. And with questions about Jalen Hurts' health going into next week, there's a chance they do it again. Unfortunately, that brings me to our Balls Out Player of the Week, and that's Saquon Barkley. As much as I love watching Saquon run over the Commanders, it kills me to see him do it in a green jersey. Take the over on Saquon Barkley and take a piece of my heart while you're at it. Moving on to the late game, the Kansas City Chiefs take on the Buffalo Bills. We're going to start off talking about the Bills. Solid win over the Ravens. Not a flashy performance, but the Ravens made mistakes and the Bills didn't, and that's how you win playoff games. And that brings us to the Chiefs. Now, I talk about the Chiefs a lot in this show, and it's usually in jest, but what we saw last week was one of the most blatant and disgusting examples of referees impacting a game. It was appalling, and it has no place in the world's greatest sport. And as a result, I'm protesting. I am not making a pick on this game because I do not trust these referees. I am not making a pick for this game. Instead, I'll leave the pick up to Big Game Buster, still undefeated in the playoffs, and we'll see you next time on Balls Out. The Super Bowl is finally here, and it is the worst case scenario. Welcome to the season finale of Balls Out. For 95% of the country, myself included, this is a no-win scenario. Either we have to hear about how great the Chiefs are for the next 5 years, because let's face it, as soon as they're bad again, everyone's going to jump off the bandwagon, or for the next 50 years, we have to hear about how the scrappy, underdog Philadelphia Eagles toppled the Dynasty Chiefs just 7 years after beating the great Tom Brady. We're fucked either way. But, as always, it is my job to give you the picks with a very limited rate of success, so damn it, that's what I'm going to do. And my first Balls Out player of the week is Saquon Barkley. Now, I know a lot of my fellow Giants fans aren't too happy with Saquon Barkley. I'm not one of them. I'm glad to see him succeed. He's a fantastic player, and I'm happy to see him do great things. I just wish he wasn't doing them in Philadelphia. Either way, we're going to take the over on Saquon Barkley. Moving on to the Chiefs side of things, we're going to take something a little riskier. We're going to go with the speedster, Xavier Worthy. Before Worthy made it to the NFL, there were a lot of questions as to whether a guy of his size could compete in this league. Then he got drafted to the Chiefs, and all those doubts just went away. So we're going to take an anytime touchdown for Xavier Worthy. And finally, the pick. Give me the Chiefs. Hey, stop booing. Whoa! Don't throw things. Look, it's clear the Chiefs have the refs in their pocket, and they're going to keep winning as long as Goodell wants them to. Let's just hope next season it's a little less obvious. Speaking of which, we'll see you next season on Balls Out.